From a network of highly secure, top secret locations across South Texas, this is still the Spurs Insider Podcast. I am your host, Mike Finger, joined, as always, by Express News beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn and Express News sports editor Nick Talbot. And the first order of business, I suppose, is to confirm that we still exist. Has the Express News confirmed that, Tom or Jeff? Does the podcast still exist in the world?
What's to say? I've been pondering my own existence for 45 years now, so I still haven't come to any kind of conclusions.
But as far as we know, this podcast has not been canceled.
I don't know. What did you do?
I don't know. It's just been a while.
I see what you're saying.
The last time we met from these secure locations, I believe we were talking about a play-in game that the Spurs were going to try to triumph in. And
did they win?
I don't know if we have an update on that. Did the Spurs win the play-in game? How did that go? And has anything else happened since then?
I think they lost. Also, Tom reminded me yesterday about the hat stool. So that's another thing that's happened since then.
Oh, that's true. The play-in game, refresh my memory, was in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
As opposed to New Orleans, Nebraska.
Yeah. And it was a very difficult. The Spurs had a difficult trip in general. They did not prevail in the play-in game. But even before then, and this feels like years ago, decades ago, but Tom Ringo Orsborn learned that it's very difficult to have a decent meal in New Orleans on a Tuesday night. Is that correct, Tom?
It was a Tuesday night. Everything was shut down. Tuesday night is the traditional day off for New Orleans restaurants, at least the ones that I had accumulated a list of that I wanted to share with you guys.
The Arby's was open.
So we ended up in a place where the waiter comes over and says to Jeff McDonald, representing South Texas, representing our city, our state in this city of culture, New Orleans, Louisiana. The waiter comes over and says, "Sir, would you like a stool for your baseball cap?" So he got a hat stool. It was pretty great. Then your local Cagers did what everybody expected and came up just a bit short against the Pelicans, showing my age there. The New Orleans Pelicans held on, and then we had a whole NBA postseason in which your Spurs did not participate. And now we're reconvening the week of the NBA first-year player draft. And that's happening later this week. And I guess that's what we're going to discuss today, unless anybody has any better ideas. Tom, you attended in this interim period between our last podcast and this podcast, you attended the NBA first-year player draft combine in Chicago, Illinois. And so maybe you have some insight into what the Spurs are looking to do this week in the draft.
Yeah, they did their due diligence, as they always do. The big news to me out of Chicago was that one of the guys doing the interviews was one Manu Ginobili. And he was very involved, and I was told that he was the whole affair fascinated him since he did not participate in it during his draft process. But, Manu being Manu, he was curious about the whole thing and sat in on all the interviews, did one with an Italian player where he discussed the Italian player's contract. And, the guys that were super excited to meet him, the draft prospects, and that just added a whole new flavor to the Spurs combine experience. But, they did their due diligence. They talked to the usual suspects or the suspects we thought they would talk to. And, Jeremy Sohan, Johnny Davis, guys of that nature. And so it was a fun experience.
It's been sort of amusing to me to look out at the rest of the NBA over the past few days and weeks, and every day you see pop up like a video. I saw this morning a video from Pacers open workout of Shaedon Sharpe or whatever. It's like there are two very different NBAs. There's one in which the media comes and watches the draft workouts, there's a window for reporters to take out their camera phones and say, hey, here's name your guys. Here's six guys working out for the Los Angeles Lakers today or whoever. And the Spurs, none of that. That would be. I don't think we will ever see a video from Tom Osborne of one of his 3 phones that he carries around of any of them taking a shot of the Jalen Duren or any of these guys coming by and working out for your Spurs. So there's just different philosophies in how open teams are, and the Spurs are always going to be one of the least open when it comes to sharing intelligence in the days and weeks leading up to the draft. And that could be frustrating for fans. It could be frustrating for podcasters, but that's just the way it is.
Is the statute of limitations run out on the old John Mason story? Can we tell that?
Go ahead.
This comes from an old friend of the podcast, Mike Monroe, a story he told me a long time ago, way back when the Spurs were after a fella called Jan Mahinmi. Remember that guy? So This would have been about 2007, maybe? No, 5. It was definitely 2005 because it was the same year the Spurs were playing Detroit. And when a newspaper covers the NBA Finals back then, you write stories about everything. So we had a reporter write a story about the PA announcer in Detroit at the Palace of Auburn Hills, whose name is John Mason. He was a big kind of peripheral story of that because I guess the nation had not heard him as much as they did during that 7-game finals. So our reporter writes something on the PA announcer called John Mason. And there's a headline in our paper, something John Mason. Now, the other bit of the story is the Spurs also are so, this is why I'm telling the story, are also so paranoid about people finding out who they're after that they were making up code names for guys. So Jan Mahinmi, since Jan is French for John, he was John, and they took the first two initial letters of his last name, M.A., and made up a different last name. So they had been calling him John Mason all spring long, like before the Spurs were playing Detroit. And so R.C. Buford picks up the San Antonio Express News one day and sees this headline about John Mason, and all of a sudden it has a small aneurysm because how did they find out that we've been calling, and then reads the story and realizes it's a different John Mason. And so the point of that story is just the links they at least went to at that time to sort of cover their tracks and throw people off the scent. So yeah, they're not inviting us to one Spurs lane there to watch whoever is working out for them on a daily basis.
You wonder how the Warriors have been able to be so successful with the opposite approach.
Yeah.
You just wonder how that happens.
I don't know.
I think it's just a general frame of mind, a general mindset that kind of permeates from the top down, and it's just the way. It's just a way of doing business, and I don't expect people to change their colors, change their feathers overnight. It's just different ways of doing things. But you can't say that, the like a couple of years ago, the Warriors played the Raptors in the finals. And that was a meeting of the top 2 most open PR staffs in the league. Those were like the cream of the crop in terms of making people available and stuff like that. And it just goes to show that there's not one right or wrong way of doing things, but being covert all the time doesn't necessarily guarantee success any more than being open does. It's just different ways of doing stuff. I think the other historical tidbit involving R.C. Buford opening up the San Antonio Express News involves another old friend of the podcast, Dan McCarney, who didn't he one year peg the Spurs? Who was it that he pegged that the Spurs picked? I think it was another foreign player. They just low in the first round.
Nicola. Oh, I'm forgetting the last name. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have to pull this name out today. They just included him in one of the trades at the trade deadline.
Multinevich.
Yes,
Multinich.
yes,
Yeah. Dan McCarty had
Militinov,
gotten that.
actually.
Militinov. There you go. Dan had gotten that right in the in one of his mock drafts in the newspaper, and RC actually later joked about how impressed he was by that. We actually got one right.
I think when RC came out to announce the pick, he said it's because that's who Dan wanted. They wanted to make Dan look good. So
yeah. But anyway, so this is just a long introduction to say that if you tuned into this podcast, and there's no way that you did if you listened to this podcast before, but if you tuned into this podcast expecting a scoop on who your local Cagers are going to pick this week, you probably tuned into the wrong podcast. I'm sorry to say.
We can make some guesses, though.
We can make some guesses. To review, the local Cagers have what has the potential to be their most action-packed first round, for most action-packed draft maybe in history. They own picks number 9, number 20, number 25 in the first round, I believe, in addition to a second rounder.
That is correct.
So we can get into all of that. I will say, as probably the one person on this podcast who watched any amount of college basketball this year, these picks aren't like there's the opportunity to trade. There might be some wheeling and dealing. They might get the guys they're looking for. But in terms of the glamour guys, the guys I watched a lot of, like, these picks are sort of in between. Like, I would love if the 9 was a little higher or a little low. Like, I really like. I always thought that, like, Keegan Murray at Iowa would have been a great Spur. Even like Benedict Mathurin at Arizona, I think is probably going to go a little higher than 9. Those would be cool Spurs. Probably not going to get to number 9. Like, I really like Mark Williams, the center at Duke. And he's probably going to go lower than, like, he could be in the 15 and 20, type range. So it isn't perfect for some of the guys who, when I was watching college basketball this year, thought, hey, those really could fit in with the local Cagers. But I mean, the Spurs kind of go against the flow usually anyway. So there's probably a good chance that on all these picks, they could find somebody they really like if they don't trade them. But does anybody, I'll open the floor if anybody has any hot draft takes, any guys they're looking at, any guesses they want to make.
I think the question is going to be interesting on how they approach it, and especially that first pick. I mean, that's their first top 10 pick in a quarter of a century, so it seems like an important pick to make. And as I've mentioned a bunch of times, they've used 6 straight first-round picks on guys 6'6" or smaller. Now, Derek White isn't there anymore, and Lonnie Walker might not be here after free agency, so maybe there is some room to take another guy. But to me, the question is, do you still go with the best talent you can find at that pick, or do you start to look at we need some taller, as we're rebuilding, we need some young big men as well? And do you kind of lean towards maybe you got to go with like a Jalen Duren or someone like that? So to me, it'll be interesting to see how they approach it. And you can also, if you don't get a 6'10" guy at 9, maybe you get him at 20 or 25. But it'll be just interesting to me to see what the philosophy, what the approach is, really to the whole night.
Well, great example, I think, is a need pick would be Duren, but Johnny Davis would be another bold pick. You have plenty of players that fit that mold, like Johnny Davis, but he's got great upside. Seems like that would be another bold pick that they would make. So it's that kind of question. Do you go with fit or another bold pick of a player you may already have, but you just can't pass up?
I'm going to disagree a little bit in that I think Johnny Davis is probably, of all the people mentioned for the Spurs, and this could come back to haunt me next week, is the guy that I think least. I'm very down on that as being a Spurs pick. I think Johnny Davis is a low upside. I don't see him becoming a star. And I think in the answer to Jeff's question, they're going to get size at some point. Jeff alluded to this. You could get size lower. You can get size somewhere. That one of their 3 picks is going to be a big guy. But the Spurs philosophy in general will be what it has been in recent years, is you take a big swing because it's the only way you get a superstar in San Antonio is to draft him. And I think that's why you stay away from Jalen Duren. You stay away from Johnny Davis, because I don't see either of those guys becoming, they kind of are who they are. And I don't think either of those guys are going to be the guy you dream on and say, hey, this guy might not make it, but if he does, he could be something special. I think that is the philosophy. I'll bring up 2 names from recent drafts, and they may or may not be success stories, but I think that's why your Spurs took Joshua Primo when they took him. That is a high delta, high variance type pick where if he works out the way they hope he does, like he's got superstar in him. But there's also a huge percentage of his outcomes is he doesn't become anything. And then the other one is Luka Samanic. Like that's why they took him there instead of who was available there? Brandon Clark.
Yes.
So you can look back and say, hey, they should have taken Brandon Clark, who's a productive role player for the Memphis Grizzlies. Well, Brandon Clark is I kind of compare Brandon Clark's range of outcomes to like a Johnny Davis's range of outcomes, where you feel pretty comfortable that those guys are going to be productive role players for teams. But I don't see, like, Brandon Clark was not going to become a superstar. And it's easy to say in retrospect, yeah, the Spurs should have taken Brandon Clark. And if they had to do it again, they would. But they took Luka, the second Luka, because they thought if this guy works out, he could be amazing. You know, this guy with a 7-foot body and all kinds of skills, and he could become incredible. And I think that's probably still the approach in a way, is you stay away from the sure things, at least with the number 9 pick. Maybe you can take more of a high floor type person at 20 or 25. But I think with 9, you are going to shoot for the stars in a way and be willing, as you did with Josh Primo, you have to be willing to kind of be criticized for not taking the obvious pick there and go instead for the guy with the huge delta, like I said.
So if you go out that finger, who you think that swing is? That's
what I was going to ask.
Fit that profile as well, like Dyson Daniels, if he's still there at 9, instead of Durant, instead of the Shaden Sharps, even the AJ Griffin.
One guy that Tom mentioned earlier, who he talked to in Chicago, is I think Jeremy Sohan is that type of guy, and that he's not there yet. I watched a little bit of Baylor this year, and he did not scream top 10 pick when you watched him play, but he's got the skills. He's already, one thing that makes him fit the Spurs profile is he's already a really, really, really solid defender. But like you look at him at the offensive end and there's nothing that screams, he's ready to dominate in the NBA, but there's like that starter kit of athleticism. And if you squint, you can see a guy who can become an efficient outside shooter, see a guy who can get into the lane and finish plays like that. Like that's the type of guy I'm thinking that could either make the Spurs look really smart in a few years for taking him, or he might be out of the league in 3 years, or just be, like a role player type defender off the bench. And then like the flip side, like I'm not anti Jalen Duren, but I don't like he's just a solid. To me, he's a solid big man type who's going to guard the rim and finish, maybe do like DeAndre Jordan type stuff. But he's not. I don't. And again, I'm not a scout. I'm not a GM. I could be talking out of my rear end right now, but I don't see like Jalen Duren.
We don't have a video.
I'm pretty talented in places where I talk out of, but yeah, I don't know. I really, a lot of people like Johnny Davis. I just see there's too many echoes of like Derek White and just like, and I'm not anti Derek White. It's just, I feel like when I watch Johnny Davis, I know what he's going to be and it's fine. he could be one of the more productive players of the draft in the long run. But I don't see him becoming the superstar that I think the Spurs covet and need. But again, I'm no scout.
Another swing for the fences kind of name I would throw out there, and I'll probably butcher the first name, but it's this kid from France, Ousmane Dieng.
Yeah.
That's another guy that you hear. Yeah, just not there yet. Probably will look overmatched if you're on an NBA floor, this fall. But just the collection of size and athleticism and ball skills. The NBA is going where if you can find a 6'10" guy that plays like a guard, you're doing pretty well for yourself. And he's another guy. I mean, you hate to compare, 19-year-olds to two-time MVPs, but it's kind of that Giannis phenomenon where the guy comes over and he looks like he's about 12, but you can just see all the arms and legs and skills, and eventually it could become something. The Bucks got Giannis at 15, and that's kind of what I think. If you're the Spurs, it sounds obvious, but that's what you're looking to do. You're looking to take a big swing on someone at 9 that could be the best player in this draft. Has a chance to develop into the best player into the draft.
That was the Josh Primo philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that may or may not work out, but I expect them to do that again. And I do think that with 3 first-round picks, if they make them all, that at least one of them are going to be on like an Ousmane Dieng or there's another Nikola, one letter off from Jokic. There's Nikola Jovic, somebody like that. They're going to take that type of swing, I think, definitely with one of those picks, if not more of them.
I think you can do a combination of both, like you were saying. Yeah. Use some of the picks on a Derek White type that's just going to be solid from the beginning and solid all the way through, and then take some swings. So that's kind of the benefit of having 3 shots at this if they don't trade one of those picks.
Have we ruled out moving up?
We have not. And I think there are teams, maybe not in the top 3 or 4, but
I was going to say you're not going to get to the top 4. But I don't think
5, 6, 7, 8 range would be when I say I've read that Portland is entertaining offers for, and that would be like if the Spurs really like someone that they is hoping that would. That they're hoping would fall to 9, but might not get there. You give something up just to move up 1 or 2 spots to get that guy. And I don't know who that guy would be, but I think that's definitely a possibility. You package the 9 pick with one of those lower first round picks, maybe a pick in the future year to move up a couple spots. Maybe that happens. We're not going to talk this whole time about the draft because, again, we're not the scouts, we're not the experts, but other names maybe lower in the draft. AJ Griffin's interesting to me. I'm not sure that he's the pick at 9. He's had injury issues. I watched a lot of Duke this year. He reminds me a little bit of Jimmy Butler. Like, I don't think he's going to become Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler with like a catch and shoot 3-point shot. He would be interesting to me. Blake Wesley from Notre Dame maybe is an opportunity, an option in that 20 or 25 spot. And then if you want to go just high floor at 20 or 25, a guy who's ready to play, probably is what he is, can be a Spur pretty quickly. EJ Liddell at Ohio State. Although I figure if I throw enough names out on this podcast that I'll get one of them right.
Ty Washington.
Ty Washington. He's another name out there. Anyway, there's lots of interesting options. We can also look forward to, since this ties in, Spurs are going to be making decisions this week about what their team looks like next year, and that will lead directly into free agency. And Jeff, you mentioned earlier one of the names that's going to be part of the biggest discussion of the offseason. That's Lonnie Walker, and we've talked about him many times in this podcast before. But while we're making predictions here, is Lonnie Walker going to come back or not?
I'm gonna say a soft yes.
He did enough late in the season to warrant that decision, I would say.
I'm just kind of thinking it out as it's coming out of my mouth. So I might, the next time we do this podcast, I'd reserve the right to completely change my mind. But I just feel like they're if you look at the free agent market, there's just not a lot of guys you could see the Spurs really wanting to throw money after that are going to come here. So I'm not saying. I mean, obviously there's a price point where no, we're not going to pay Lonnie Walker XYZ amount of money. But I think I think you can spend some amount of money to bring him back and let him be part of this core. And I think he kind of towards the end of last season, kind of showed that he can be. I think he started to find his fit, is what I'm saying. His NBA niche. Yeah. He's probably not a starter, a guy you're going to throw out there and start, but just a guy that comes off the bench and just sets stuff on fire. I think he's really started to grow comfortable with that role. I know he told me last year, of course he would love to be an NBA starter somewhere, and whether or not that plays into his decision making this summer, I don't know, but I think he's a pretty explosive bench player, and I think when you start looking around the free agent crop at the guys the Spurs could get, I don't know that they're really going to find a better player than that this summer.
What it really boils down to, and I don't think this has changed at all since our last podcast, since the beginning of last year, since Lonnie's been here, it's just cruel, cold math. And that if the Spurs need his spot to sign a guy to a max contract, they have to let him go.
Right.
But if there's nobody willing, like that's the choice you make. And I don't think this is going to happen. I think there's been reporting this week that Zach LaVine is looking more likely than ever to re-up with the Bulls, which always seemed like the most likely outcome because the Bulls can offer him more than everybody else. But if like Zach LaVine is saying to the Spurs that, hey, I'll come if you open up a max spot for me, well, then to open that up, you have to say goodbye to Lonnie Walker, and you probably do that, and it's probably not complicated. Like as much as the Spurs love Lonnie Walker, as much as Lonnie Walker likes being in San Antonio, if you get a chance to sign another star like Zach LaVine, and the way to do that is to open up that spot, then you open up that spot. But if it doesn't look like that's going to happen with Zach LaVine or with any other all-star type that's a free agent this year. So if that option isn't there and it becomes a choice of, hey, do you re-sign Lonnie Walker or go find some Lonnie Walker replacement on the market, like some other just backup type of guy, I think you stick with what you have. In other words, it sorts itself out. If there's no superstar coming here, if there's no big trade in the works where they need to create space, I think Lonnie Walker is a good value for what he's going to sign for, which is to be a like you said, a off the bench energy guy. I don't see any team. Do you think any team in the league is salivating for the chance to make Lonnie Walker a starter?
No, I don't think so.
Probably not. And that's not, I think Lonnie Walker's role in San Antonio is going to be as significant of a role as he'll find anywhere.
And likewise, I don't think any team, and I don't mean this as any kind of slight against Lonnie Walker at all, but I don't think any team is salivating to throw crazy money at Lonnie Walker either. That would be the only other reason you'd let him walk, is if someone just offered him something outlandish.
The Jonathan Simmons scenario where wasn't it Orlando who money whipped him basically?
Yeah.
And Orlando didn't work out well for Orlando.
No, for anybody.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably the outcome we're looking at. If the Spurs aren't adding something huge where they need the money, then it makes sense for everybody to bring him back. And I think that's good for Lonnie, good for Spurs, good for the Spurs media contention, because Lonnie's just a delightful interview almost all the time. And would love to keep talking to him over the years because, he's good for us. Anyway, is there anything else we need to hit on before we part ways?
There's a big, I don't know when this podcast is going to be released into the world, but there's a big press conference tomorrow.
By the time this is published, we might know, or published. By the time this reaches your devices, your mobile devices, the Spurs might have a New Jersey patch. Is that right, Tom?
I mean,
that is correct. Sources indicate it's going to be a tech credit company replacing Frost Bank, which has decided to pivot. They got the naming rights at the Northwest, the event plaza at the Northwest campus. So they decided to not do the jersey patch anymore, which they've done since 2018. And sources say it'll be a tech credit company that will replace Frost Bank on the jersey patch.
Are we excited about this? Can we do a whole special section about the jersey patch?
But not crypto? There's no crypto involved in this, correct?
Yeah.
That's probably good.
That's what we can.
That's probably best with the way crypto's performing right now.
How long before they change the name of that arena in LA back to Staples?
Well, it's not just that one. I think both of the arenas in Florida are named after crypto companies.
Well, did Orlando change theirs? Orlando's not Amway anymore?
No, Orlando is named after a crypto thing. I think.
When did that happen?
It's been a few years, Jeff.
Well, been a few years. Well, we haven't. What?
It's been a year or so. Last year, both Miami and Orlando were named after crypto stuff. We're going to look back on this period basically, we're not going to look back on this period in history. Like we're ever going to be able to look back the way we're all headed. Anyway, this is not the way we usually end the podcast. We usually end the podcast on a much brighter note.
Anyway, I just looked it up because I didn't know what you're talking about. But the arena in Orlando is still called the Amway Center.
I don't think you're right.
I'm looking at the website for the Orlando Magic right now.
Are you sure?
Well, unless it's an old page or something.
I looked it up as well, and I think it told me the Amway Center as well. Maybe crypto's already left. They've already
Maybe
left.
crypto's already left. When I could have sworn there was a Tim Reynolds.
I've never heard of this.
Just a mess down there in Florida.
It is just a mess.
As someone who graduated from college in Florida, it's always a mess down in Florida for one reason or another.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. And that's a good way to end this. You have to admit when you're wrong. I was wrong. I don't know what I'm thinking. Did I dream it? You
have some weirdo dreams then, if that's what you're dreaming about.
I dream about the Orlando arena being named after crypto. But I will try to serve as an example for our listenership to swallow your pride, admit when you're wrong, tip your hat to those around you. Say, well done. You did your research. You got it right. I'm not going to stand in the way of factual evidence. I was wrong. And I will admit it, go on with my day, go on with my week, and just vow to be better, vow to keep learning. And in the meantime, I will try to follow my own advice, the advice of this podcast, take care of each other, and keep it real.